Natalia Bonner. Welcome to Let's Stitch a Year of Stars Piecing Edition, block number 9. Today I'm going to be piecing the large star. Okay, so over the last several months I have been sharing with you how to piece these blocks. So these blocks are part of a stitch along, sew along, whatever you want to call it, that I have been sharing over the last year. On the first of each month I show you how to machine quilt the block, and then on the 15th I show you how to piece the next block. So you can continue on. If you want to just piece along with me, we would love that. Or if you just want to quilt along with me, you can do that too. But we'd definitely love for you to share your progress in our Facebook group called Let's Stitch a Year of Stars. All right, friends, you will want to start out by cutting all of your fabrics. You can find step-by-step cutting directions in our companion workbook called Let's Stitch a Year of Stars. Check that out over on our website, pieceandquilt.com. Once you've got all of your fabrics cut, you're ready to begin sewing. For my version of the large star, I am actually going to be using kind of this maroon color for my star, and then my background fabrics are all going to be gray. I have used the blue Mark Be Gone marker to go through and do some of my markings. All right, let's get sewing. So right into this, I've gone through and marked out those diagonal lines on my 2 7/8 inch squares. Once I've marked those out, then I'll lay my squares together right on top of each other. And now I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on each side of that draw line. Now I'm sewing here on my cute little featherweight, and I always get questions about this machine. All the details about this machine are in the description below if you want to check that out. You'll also see here that I'm going to use a scant 1/4 inch. I like to use a scant 1/4 inch, which means a little bit smaller 1/4 inch. Then I can square up my blocks as I'm going if I need to, but I'm not a perfectionist, so sometimes I just go with the flow. Now I'm going to chain piece these blocks, so I've sewn one side. Now we're going to continue that same process, stitching onto the next, making a total of 4 of these units. Now I'll clip those apart, and then we'll go back through and sew 1/4 inch on the opposite side of that marked line. And again, I'll chain piece these. Now that I've sewn 1/4 inch on each side of that draw line, we'll cut these blocks right on that draw line, and then we're going to press towards the dark. Now as I'm pressing, I like to use a little bit of the flatter as I set my seams. The flatter just helps me keep my seams and my blocks nice and flat. So now you should have 8 of those 2.5 inch squares. If you need to square those up at this point, you can do that. Moving on, let's make some flying geese units. So I should have 4 2.5 by 4.5 inch background strips. we are going to use our 2.5-inch maroon squares that we have gone through and marked that diagonal line, and we'll sew right along that diagonal line on all 4 of those squares. And again, back to chain piecing. Now that I've sewn that 2.5-inch square on those 2.5 by 4.5-inch background strips, I'll clip them apart, and then I'm going to trim 1/4 inch on the outside of that stitch line. After that, we'll press towards the dark. Now that I have those pressed, we're going to use the remaining 4 maroon 2.5-inch squares and sew those to the opposite side of the units from the previous step. So now we're completing the flying geese units. All right, now that you've chain pieced, or I've chain pieced all of those on, we'll repeat that process of clipping them apart, trimming 1/4 inch on the outside of that stitch line, and then pressing towards the dark. And then we're almost ready to put our block together. So now I have those flying geese units done. You can square your blocks up if you would like to 2.5 by 4.5 inches. Let's make those into rows. Starting out, we're going to use our flying geese units, and we're going to sew a 1/2 square triangle to the side of those units. So I'm going to lay it out, make sure they're going to fit together. We'll do 4 of these units just the same. Now once I've sewed those units to the right side, we're actually at this point going to go through and repeat the same process on the left side. Referring to the illustrations in your workbook, you'll want to make sure that these are all lined up correctly. Now before we hop over and press those rows, I'm going to take 2 of those rows and we're going to sew one of the 2.5 inch background squares to the ends of each of those rows. So I should have 4 of those squares. There'll be 1 on each end of 2 rows. And again, I'm going to chain piece these. And I just sewed that with my machine unthreaded. All right, now let's press. I am going to press all of these rows that I've just sewn going out. So from the flying geese, we're going to press out. Now once you have these units all pressed, you should have 2 units that look like that. And 2 smaller units without the end blocks. All right, this block will finish at 12 inches square. So after you have those units, then we're going to start putting the block together. I am going to lay my fabrics, starting with the shorter rows. We're going to lay those right on top of our square, our large square that is cut 8.5 inches. And we'll attach those 2 units to opposite sides. When we go to press this block, we're actually going to press towards the center now. So once I've attached that unit to one side, I'll rotate my block and attach a unit to the opposite side. You'll want to make sure that your flying geese is pointing towards that center unit. Make sure you're not sewing on the wrong side. Now that I have those 2 units on, we're going to press again. Like I said, pressing towards that center block this time. Now that we have those side units attached, we'll attach the remaining 2 to finish off this block. Now, because I don't pin, I'm kind of a crazy piecer, I like to just start out by making sure that my seams nest together really nicely. So as soon as I know that that first one nests together nicely, then I'll begin stitching and kind of working as I go, making sure that everything just nests together. With this block, there's just really the 2 seams at the ends you have to worry about. One side, now let's attach the other. Loving how this block is turning out. It's just such a crisp and clean but easy to put together block. All right, let's press that one more time, and we've got an adorable large star. And there it is, the large star. I love how this block turned out. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you share our progress in our Facebook group, Let's Stitch a Year of Stars. I'll be back on the 1st of the month to show you exactly how I machine quilted this block. Have a great day, everybody.